Hello and welcome back to True Crime Stories, where we explore unsolved and complex cases. Before getting into the details of the case, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and hit the notification button to receive the latest crime stories directly to your inbox. Today we look at the shocking case of Timothy Coggins and why it took 3 decades to solve his senseless death. Spalding County is located in central West Georgia and is notable for its natural beauty and rich culture, with many beautiful lakes, scenic parks, and historic sites. However, in the 1980s, life here was very different, with clear divisions between white and black communities. Racial tensions increased, especially due to the presence of the Ku Klux Klan, a far-right white supremacist terrorist organization. On Sunday, October 9, 1983, a crisp fall morning, a group of hunters was walking through an open field north of Griffin, Georgia, near a large oak tree known as the hanging tree. They accidentally discovered the body of a black man who had suffered greatly before dying. The victim's face and head were brutally beaten, while the body was bruised and bloody. The hunters quickly called the authorities. Officers from the Spalding County Sheriff's Department immediately responded to the scene and confirmed the initial description of the Amito. Notably, the victim was not wearing a shirt. His pants and knee-length underwear were missing, and a large X had been carved on his stomach. When examining the scene, officers noticed tire tracks stretching everywhere. They found a bloody sweater upside down near the tire mark area, along with some blood stains. They surmised that the victim had been dragged behind a vehicle before being left to die. No weapons were found at the scene, only an empty bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey and a wooden table leg wrapped in black tape. Sand samples and other evidence were also collected. The body was then transported to the coroner's office for an autopsy. Examiners determined the victim had been stabbed 10 times in the back, and once in the back of the head to disable him. He also had defensive wounds on both arms. In addition, the victim was hit hard in the head with a blunt object, possibly a table leg found at the scene. 2 large X's carved into the victim's stomach and back were later identified as symbols of the Confederate flag. The examiner estimated that the victim had died approximately 36 hours before being discovered, possibly on October 7, 1983. The cause of death was blood loss from severe injuries, not a specific injury. Investigators had difficulty determining the victim's age, estimating him to be in his early to mid-20s, about 5 feet 7 inches tall, and with a small tattoo on his hand. When they checked recent missing person reports, they found no relevant leads. In search of information, police officers sought the assistance of Oscar Jordan, one of the few black officers in Spalding County. They hope Jordan can forge a connection between the predominantly white police force and the black community. Amid racial tensions, Jordan went door to door asking if they recognized the victim in the autopsy photo. However, identifying the face of a person who has been brutally beaten and disfigured is very difficult. Jordan eventually arrived at the Coggins family home in Griffin, Georgia, where he met Telsa Coggins. At first, Telsa did not recognize the man in the photo, but after looking closely, she recognized the small tattoo on his hand and confirmed it was her brother, Timothy Wayne Coggins. Timothy was born on October 29, 1960 in Griffin, Georgia, the 4th of 8 children. Timothy had 3 brothers and 4 sisters, and was raised by his mother Viola and stepfather Robert Dorsey. His niece described Timothy as charming, cheerful with a bright smile. He is well liked in the Griffin community, often doing odd jobs, and is a gentle person who enjoys the simple things in life. He has a close bond with his sister Toysa Coggins, teaching her to ride a bike and taking her around town. Timothy is famous for being an extrovert and loves to organize parties and socialize with friends. Timothy also has a special charm, especially with women, and always considers everyone his friend, regardless of whether he is strange or familiar. During the investigation, Officer Oscar Jordan interviewed Twiza about the last day she saw Timothy alive. According to Twiza, on Friday, October 7th, 1983, she and Timothy went to the People's Choice Club in Griffin, Georgia. This is a popular place for young black people, with a well-stocked bar with drinks and grilled food. Timothy is not only a regular customer, but also helps the owner with some odd jobs. Although the People's Choice Club is usually reserved for black people, Timothy danced with a white woman, which caused a reaction from his friends. They warn him that this relationship could cause trouble, but Timothy reassures them that there will be no problems. Twiza said she heard two white men were waiting for Timothy outside the club. When she went into the bathroom and came out, she saw that he was no longer dancing but was following a white man out of the club. That was the last time she saw him alive. When Officer Jordan asked Twiza why no one had reported Timothy missing, she explained that he often disappeared for several days on weekends. Timothy knew many people and often stayed with friends, so his family thought he was safe. However, the truth about Timothy's disappearance quickly becomes a nightmare for the Coggins family. During the investigation, the Coggins family was continuously harassed by unknown people. Timothy's stepfather, Robert, receives an anonymous call threatening that more family members will be killed if the investigation is not dropped. He also found a bloody T-shirt on the school bus he was driving, seemingly taunting the evidence collected at the scene. One night, while the family was watching television, a brick was thrown through the living room window, with the words "Next is you" written on the brick. The nightmare didn't stop there. They were even more frightened when a decapitated black dog was left on the porch, along with a note saying, "You are next." Timothy was eventually buried at Fuller Chapel United Methodist, but the family did not dare place a tombstone on his grave for fear that it would be desecrated. Officer Jordan continued to investigate the case and heard rumors about a possible motive related to Timothy's death. Several sources said Timothy took about $600 from several white men in exchange for marijuana, but never delivered, and feared they might come after him. Jordan also received information about a parking lot in a mobile home park near where Timothy's body was discovered, where a man was bragging about the incident. During the investigation in the parking lot, Officer Jordan encountered a woman named Sandra Bunn. She said that on the night Timothy was murdered, she saw him with three other people: Frankie Gebart, her brother, his girlfriend Mickey, and Frankie's brother-in-law Bill Morser. Sandra said the four got into a pickup truck and drove toward the gallows tree. With this new information and the names of the three suspects, Jordan returned to the investigation team to present his theory. However, when he found a proverbial needle in the high pile, the case was taken away and reassigned to other investigators. Jordan was dismissed from the team and returned to patrol duty. Frankie Gart was called in for questioning as investigators worked with the information Jordan had gathered. Frankie provides an alibi that he was with his girlfriend Mickey the entire time. When Mickey was called, she confirmed Frankie's alibi, claiming that they had never been to the People's Choice Club because it was an establishment reserved for black people. They claimed to have never met Timothy Coggins or had any dealings with him. According to investigators' notes, no witnesses were able to accurately identify who last saw Timothy. Timothy did not pursue suspect more, and all detectives searched Gard's trailer but found no financial evidence linking him. At the scene, no blood samples were found that matched the blood types of Gard or Moore. DNA testing at the time was in its infancy, and investigators appeared to close the probe despite suspicions that someone was evading responsibility for Timothy's death. The incident quickly became a footnote in Spalding County Sheriff's records, while the Coggins family continued to suffer. They felt the law had failed them and feared falling victim to those who had threatened them with violence after Timothy's death. The family has lived with this nightmare for more than 30 years. Viola Hagen Dorsey, Timothy's mother, was heartbroken by her son's death and lived with guilt until her death in February 2016. A few weeks before her death, she made a shocking statement. Shocking. Viola tells her daughter Lisa that investigators will find Timothy's killer. She did not believe that she would live to see that day, but believed that someone would find her son's killer. Even on her deathbed, she still mentioned Timothy's name, expressing her desire for justice for her son even though 33 years have passed. The Coggins family has no expectations after all these years because no one has contacted them about the case. However, in July 2017, they received a call from the district attorney's office, informing them that they knew who killed Timothy. In December 2016, Agent Jared Coleman received Timothy Coggins' open case file. For years, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation has handled major crimes from more rural areas in the state and rotated unsolved cases among agents every 6 months, hoping to find new leads. At the time, Coleman, who was in his second year at the agency, was shocked by the lack of investigation into Timothy's murder. He feels that no one has been interested in looking into the case in recent years. Determined to find justice for Timothy, Coleman dug deep into the files and discovered some evidence that could help solve the cold case. He reviewed interviews with suspects Frankie Gard, Mickey, and Bill Morser, and found too many holes in their stories. The two only had each other as witnesses and had said they had no connection to Timothy. Coleman also discovered that Bill Moore, another suspect, had been completely overlooked in the investigation. An important development in 2007 has been forgotten when the DBI received a letter from Christopher Vall, a prisoner serving time for pedophilia. In the letter, Vall alleged that he had information regarding the murder of Timothy Coggins. He was only 10 years old when he discovered Timothy's body along with others near the hanging tree. In Coleman's files, he found interviews with Christopher Vall. However, it appears that investigators did not follow up on this lead, causing the case to go cold again. Determined, Coleman contacted the Spalding County Sheriff's Department and the newly elected sheriff, Daryl Dix. Sheriff Dix listened to Coleman's theory on the case and believed they could give the Coggins family the answers they needed. For Dix, this is also an opportunity to improve relations between the Black community and the police department, given the uneasy history between them. Chief Dix assigned Chief Mike Morris to work with Coleman to review the crime scene. The oak tree was mentioned in interviews as the site of drug transactions, and Timothy's body was found on power lines. Coleman felt that Timothy's death amounted to an execution and that he may have been tortured before being left in the clearing. Meanwhile, Sheriff Dix begins his own investigation and requests the collection of evidence from the scene. He was disappointed to discover that most, if not all, of the evidence was missing, including whiskey bottles, table legs, bloody shirts, and tire tracks. This suggests that there was either a serious case of mishandling of evidence or a cover-up on the part of the original investigators. Sheriff Dix began looking into cases involving hate crimes and racism from the 1980s. He discovered a diary of an undercover detective who had tried to infiltrate the Spalding County branch of the Ku Klux Klan. The diary dates from 1982, a year before Timothy was murdered. In his notes, the detective describes his attempt to join the Klan to uncover the people behind the right-wing group. He was eventually inducted into the Klan, and it was revealed by a member that many high-ranking officials from the Spalding County Sheriff's Department and the Griffin Police Department were involved. Sheriff Dix finds that the people who are supposed to help solve the case are sabotaging the investigation. It's time to review the suspects and witnesses. Coleman and Dix put forward their theory, and on April 26, 2017, Coleman visited Christopher Vall in prison. Two familiar names, Frankie Gard and Bill Moore, repeatedly appeared in Vall's testimony. He said that in 1983, he heard Frankie Gard mention killing a black man at a party and brag about the murder of Timothy Coggins. Gard also admitted to burning all relevant evidence and throwing it into the well. Vaff said that on the night of Timothy's murder, he saw 3 suspects, including Frankie Gard, with the victim. He also said that Gbart was furious when he discovered that his then-girlfriend, Mickey, had been having an affair with a black man. Coleman and the investigation team believe that Mickey is the woman witnesses saw dancing with Timothy. However, they could not confirm because Mickey left Georgia a few weeks after the murder and passed away in 2010. Still, Coleman didn't give up. They still have 2 suspects on the list. First, they interviewed Bill Morser, who vehemently denied knowing Timothy or being involved in the murder. Coleman realized that Moore had lied. They did not press him further but turned their attention to Frankie Gbart, who was in custody, unrelated sexual assault charges. When Coleman and his team visited Gbart, he denied any knowledge of Timothy Coggins and claimed to have never heard of the case. Gbart continued to deny boasting about killing people or disposing of evidence, even daring investigators to dig a well if they wanted. When Coleman showed Gbart a photo of Timothy, he flew into a rage and claimed he had never seen the victim. Coleman researched Gbart's past, discovering that he lived near a trailer park in Sunnyside, dropped out of school and worked as a logger. Later in the week, he and his brother-in-law Bill Morser, often partying with drugs and alcohol. Gbart and Moore have been accused of engaging in acts of violence, including killing a cow in one of their trailers, suggesting their links to the crime are not far-fetched. Coleman soon realized that many people were willing to talk, knowing investigators were following the suspects. In July 2017, police announced the reopening of the Timothy Coggins case after new leads and warned the killers that they would be hunted. Although most witnesses remained secret for nearly 34 years, some accounts were discovered by investigators. Gbart allegedly told several people that he told them different stories to confuse the investigation. A key witness, William Sadler, who was in the hunting party that discovered Timothy's body, said Gbart not only had difficulty confessing, but also reported the confession to police in 1983. But nothing came of it. That work. Another witness, Shirley Sisk, gave testimony about Bill Morser. She had been friends with Moore's late wife, Brenda, and said Brenda told her that Moore planned to murder a boy, dragging him behind his truck. Moore also threatened Sisk, warning that she would end up like the black boy in the ditch. Another anonymous woman accused Gbart and Moore of drunkenly admitting to the murder and being nostalgic for the old days when they had murdered black people. When arrest warrants were issued for both Gbart and Moore, the investigation team faced backlash from the defendants' families. They claimed that tracking the suspects is an attempt to attract support from the black community. Brandy Abomi, Moore's daughter, said her family had never heard of the Timothy Coggins case before. Still, investigators felt there was enough circumstantial evidence to bring the two men to justice. However, in a murder trial, more is needed to close the case. A member of the victim's family expressed hope for finding the culprit, but also emphasized that the prosecution needs evidence linking the two suspects to the case. Coleman met with attorney Marie Brewer, who shared that the lack of evidence handling by the sheriff's department had frustrated the prosecution team, as without appropriate physical evidence, the jury could not rule in their favor. Coleman recalled Christopher Vaugh's words about the well on Gbart's property. Excavating the well will destroy Gbart's home. But Coleman and the investigation team are determined to find justice. They found a hydrovac company in Atlanta that uses water to vacuum up debris without causing damage to property. In August 2017, they dredged and discovered important evidence. In the pile of trash, they found a pair of burn-sized 10 Adidas tennis shoes, similar to the shoes Timothy's family confirmed he often wore. They also discovered a torn white t-shirt with multiple stab wounds, corresponding to Timothy having been stabbed 7 times in the back. A thick chain that may have been used to tie and pull Timothy out was also found. The most important evidence is an old broken knife. Timothy's sister, Talisa, expressed concern about the trial. She doesn't feel certain until the final verdict. Nothing is guaranteed. As a black woman living in a racist town, you never know what will happen, she said. Talisa prayed to God to protect her siblings and felt joy when she learned that Tim's killer had been caught. Before the dust settled, new evidence discovered in a well at Gbart's property revealed another important detail. After an interview with Gbart in April 2017, investigators installed a wiretap to monitor his calls from prison, as they were unable to gather necessary information from Gbart. In the recordings, they discovered Gbart often called his sister Sandra Bunn, and during these conversations, Sandra advised him not to talk to investigators and how to avoid being arrested. She warned him not to accept anything to drink or eat from them, as there was a possibility they would collect DNA from those items. In sifting through the conversations, investigators found that Sandra had taken the advice of her son, Lamar, to bar an officer with the Milner Police Department. What puzzled investigators was that although Sandra had linked Timothy to Gbart and Moore, her intentions were never revealed. Investigators believe the suspect's arrogance was evident, as they thought the police would never be able to solve the case, even though they were still being followed. Furthermore, Gregory Huffman, a Spalding County corrections officer, passed on information about the investigation to Gebhardt, which helped Gebhardt stay one step ahead by providing him with information to protect himself during the investigation. The court. This made investigators and prosecutors feel the need to end the torture the Coggins family had endured. On October 13, 2017, the Spalding County Sheriff's Department and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation arrested Gebhardt and Moore for the murder of Timothy Coggins. Sandra Bunn, Lamar Bunn, and Gregory Huffman were also arrested for obstruction of justice. Lamar was suspended pending the outcome of the trial, while Huffman was fired. All were held at the Spalding County Detention Center. Now, with all the suspects in jail, investigators begin to reconstruct the events of the day leading up to Timothy's death. Investigators believe that on Friday, October 7, 1983, Timothy went to the People's Choice Club and invited Mickey to come along. Their relationship may have attracted the attention of Gebhardt, Mickey's then boyfriend. After hearing this, Gebhardt and Moore drove to the club and began asking people about Timothy. Many people have admitted to seeing Timothy with a white woman in a club, and this is not the first time they have been spotted together. In a tense situation, Gebhardt forced his way into the club and confronted Timothy and Mickey. To avoid conflict, Timothy could have agreed to talk to them. The four went to the Cary Mobile Home Park, where Gebhardt confronted Mickey and Timothy about the unclear allegations. From witness statements, investigators concluded that Gebhardt and Moore took Timothy and Mickey to a clearing near the hanging tree, where they carried out a sudden and brutal attack on Timothy. They severed his tendons to disable him, and then stabbed him in the back as he lay down, carved 2 large X's on his back and abdomen, and beat him with table legs before chaining him to the back of the semi-truck, load and tow around the field. Timothy was left for dead, while the remaining 3 returned to Gebhardt's house to destroy evidence. Investigators suggested that given Gebhardt's previous acts of violence and his ties to racist groups, he may have been motivated by jealousy at seeing Mickey in the arms of a man, another, especially a black person. Gebhardt and Moore will be tried separately for this crime. In mid-January 2018, Gebhardt's trial began. The prosecution, led by Marie Brewer, began with an impassioned statement and took the jury through the crime scene, describing how Timothy was brutally murdered. Because DNA evidence was almost lost, they had to rely on witness statements. The defense tried to puncture the prosecution's case, claiming that Gebhardt had confessed over the past 34 years and knew many details about the crime that had never been made public. Gebhardt's defense pointed out that many of the witnesses had criminal records and that their stories were inconsistent. A witness claimed that Gebhardt deliberately told different stories to confuse the investigation. One flaw in the defense was that Gebhardt constantly bragged about the murder, even accidentally revealing where the evidence was hidden, even though no DNA was found from the items. This finding supports some witness claims, such as that of Christopher Vaugh, that Gebhardt shared how he handled evidence in a well. Ultimately, the jury concluded that Gebhardt's boasting was a key factor in the success of the case. They recorded 17 times he admitted to murder. On June 26, 2018, Gebhardt was convicted of attempted murder, aggravated murder, assault, and concealing the death of another person in the Superior Court of Spalding County, Georgia. After considering the charges, the jury unanimously found him guilty, and Gebhardt was sentenced to life in prison along with 30 other charges. Years later, the judge hoped that Gebhardt had stabbed his last victim. Gebhardt remained in prison at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification State Prison in August 2018. Bill Moore Sr. avoided trial by pleading guilty to concealing a death and manslaughter, serving a sentence of 20 years in prison and 10 years in prison probation. He passed away in October 2021. Sandra, Lamar, and Huffman were each released on bond. Latest reports suggest that charges against all 3 remain unresolved. The case couldn't bring Timothy back, but it helped the family heal their wounds. The two families have been in occasional contact. Bill Moore's daughter, Brandy Abercrombie, was emotional as she apologized to the Coggins family for her family's part in Timothy's death. T.S.A. Coggins forgave her. Brandy finds it difficult to believe that her father and uncle could commit a crime. The Coggins family was able to order a headstone for Timothy without fear of offending. This case has highlighted the social injustices that many groups face, not only in the United States but around the world. The case also highlights that those who witness crime have the right to speak out and make a difference. When looking back at this case, people should think about the injustices the Coggins family faced and how their fight could have been carried out differently.